Ladies and gentlemen, students, teachers and educators, and United Way community partners, welcome to the United Way Education Town Hall, brought to you by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and Walmart, with additional support from Deloitte and Microsoft. Featuring Brian Gallagher, Rich Harwood, Patrick Corvington, Melody Barnes, Arnie Duncan, Cornell Belcher, with appearances by Greg Ballard, Namdi Asamoah, Joe Palacios, Gloria McGee, Greg Taylor, Jeff Peniston, Barry Salzberg, Margaret Spellins, Ann Stallard, Alma and Michael Powell. A live online audience. Watch parties at Microsoft, United Way of Lincoln and Lancaster County, and United Way Worldwide. And all of you,
ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Anastasia Broadus.
Good morning. I am pleased to welcome you to Trinity Washington University for the United Way Education Town Hall. My name is Anastasia Broadus, and I'm a freshman at Trinity from Hagerstown, Maryland. I came here for my college education because for more than 110 years, Trinity has been educating women leaders. I am proud to follow in the footsteps of so many great Trinity women, including the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, the first woman to be Speaker of the House, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, and New York City Schools Chancellor, Kathleen Black. I am also here because Trinity places a high priority on education, student learning, and the liberal arts. Because Trinity is guided by the ethics and values of the Sisters of Notre Dame, and because the Trinity community is committed to social justice and lifelong learning. Trinity is a community that challenges, nurtures, embraces, and prepares students to take on the world. Many of more than my 2,000 fellow Trinity students are the first in their families to attend college. Many students are starting a career after starting families as well as a career. Many of us are holding down full-time jobs and trying to make ends meet, even as we are studying for finals and writing papers. My own path to Trinity shows the importance of community and helping a student succeed. I am the first person in my family to attend college. I am very lucky to have the support of my mother and stepfather as I applied to colleges. My guidance counselor also helped. I am very fortunate to have received a lot of financial aid from Trinity to make my college education affordable. All of that support has made my dream of college a reality. I know that not every student has that support. I love being a Trinity student because my professors are committed to my education and because I am respected as an individual, and because everyone here is invested in my academic success. On behalf of President Patricia McGuire, I welcome you to the Trinity community, a community of learners, a community of leaders, and a community of empowered women. I am honored to introduce Ms. Soledad O'Brien, who will be the moderator today. Mrs. O'Brien is a journalist with CNN. She has reported on breaking news around the world, and she has also produced award-winning documentaries on issues that matter to the country and the world. In 2010, she published a book entitled The Next Big Story: My Journey Through the Land of Possibilities. In it, she makes clear the importance of creating opportunities for others, and I think that is why we're here today, to learn how to create opportunities. Now we are going to watch a quick video from the project Mrs. O'Brien is working on as part of her Education in America series.
In both mathematics and science, the U.S. students' performance ranges anywhere from simply mediocre to extraordinarily poor.
Were you lying to parents about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Now lying to parents about how well their kids were doing. How much homework do you take home every night?
Usually none.
Do you think his education is as good as anybody else in the country?
No, definitely not. Everybody just kind of copies off of each other. It's just like pass the paper around the table and then everybody gets the same grade.
How panicked should American parents be?
There was one issue that every parent in this country should be worried about. It's education.
If we don't generate the next group of innovators,
scientists, engineers.
Well, that's what I'm about to figure out.
Our standard of living, our quality of life, our security will plummet.
We call this Robotics Christmas.
Why start a robotics competition?
Our robotics competition, truth be told, isn't about robots.
I think this is a sensor, the new infrared sensor.
6 weeks of no sleeping, no eating. It's just going to be pure robots.
Yep. All right, that's good. I recoded it. It's my code. Why doesn't it work?
I think we need to take it down. Whoa! Oh. Off with his head!
So every day, for up to 12 hours a day,
And then I guess for the claw, you could do an open and close.
you're working on this project.
Yep.
So does that mean because most of the students here are poor, you cannot compete or you cannot win?
It doesn't mean we can't, it's just a lot harder.
I'm so excited!
Give me a flat tip to pop this out.
6 weeks, one goal.
Needle nose? Okay.
Our robot's fast, it's accurate. I think we have a really good shot.
I think we're pretty dangerous this year.
Yeah, we're cute out now.
Watch it, watch it, watch it, we're right.
In 3, 2, say it with me, 1.
Mrs. O'Brien, welcome to Trinity.
And thank you so much. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Over the past few years, as many of you know, I've had the pleasure, the opportunity at looking deeply into a number of issues that affect our nation. And not surprisingly, one of our probably most urgent, and I think everyone in this room would agree, is the issue of education and how ready American students will be to take on the technology challenges of the 21st century. But even when the topic of one of our programs is not explicitly education, it's always about education because, as you well know, education is the key to pretty much everything we do in this nation. A good education makes a difference when it comes to health and an economic situation in a person, in a family, in an entire community, in fact. So across the nation, people are concerned that our children are not really getting the education they need to succeed. The United Way is listening to some of these concerns that Americans have with respect to education. And at this event, we're going to talk a little bit about what exactly has been learned. We'll also hear about solutions, and they're solutions that involve actually everybody participating. So I'll begin by giving you a quick glimpse at how this morning will unfold. First, we're going to hear about the findings from the United Way's just completed national report and survey that focuses on the concerns of everyday folks about education in our nation. Then Brian Gallagher, who is the president and CEO of United Way Worldwide, will share just how the United Way plans to use the findings. A little bit later, we're going to hear from Patrick Covington. He is the CEO for the Corporation for National and Community Service. We're going to hear from the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan. We're going to hear from Melody Barnes. She is the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, as well as other educators and other policymakers this morning. And perhaps, and maybe most importantly, throughout the entire morning, we will be engaging with everyone here, online, to get your perspective on what exactly we need to do to improve education in America for all the students. We, in addition, of course, to those of you who are assembled at Trinity Washington University this morning, United Way has been holding an online town hall thanks to software and expertise that has been donated by Microsoft participants. Microsoft and participants have posted comments and voted in polls over the last several weeks. We're live streaming that this morning as part of the online town hall. We have watch parties gathered at the Mary Gates Center at United Way Worldwide headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. Hey, how are you? Microsoft employees in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Hi, good morning. And also, we have some community members and United Way staff who are at the United Way of Lincoln and Lancaster County in Nebraska joining us as well. Over to my right, we have our online team members. They'll be monitoring our online comments and live tweeting as well. We invite all of you Yes, even people in the audience. You may take out your BlackBerries, put them on silent, but you are allowed to tweet during this event. Make sure you use the hashtag, I cannot believe I'm saying that, hashtag United Way. You can also follow United Way on Twitter at live_United. One more important point for our online participants. You can submit questions. So if you have a question that you would like me to pose to Secretary Duncan, for example, he'll be with us in just a little bit, you can do that. You can also vote on questions that have been submitted by other people. And when I talk to him, I will in fact ask him the question that has gotten the most votes. So be sure to get to that today. You're going to see mics set up throughout the room today. We're going to have opportunities to hear from everyone in the audience. So that is the list of all we have to accomplish in not a whole lot of time. So we will get right to it. And I will begin with truly, people say this a lot, but there are some people who really need no introduction, and Brian Gallagher is that man. He is a man whose work and reputation you all know. He is the president and CEO of United Way Worldwide. Beginning back as a management trainee in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, he has literally dedicated his life to serving communities through the United Way. It's nice to see you this morning.
Nice
thank
to
you.
see you.
I should say thank you for having me, and let's begin our conversation. You talk about the goals for the common good. First, what are the goals for the common good, and how did you get to those?
Well, it's my volunteer and professional colleagues from across the country several years ago just came to the conclusion that we should stop measuring our success by how much money we raise or how many programs we fund. So we instead put the compass on improving people's lives. And as we talked to Americans about what should we focus on, it was education, income, and health. You know, education crisis in the US, income gap, the widest it's been since the 1920s, before the Great Recession, and so many people without access to health care. So in the education area, we've set a goal with our partners to cut the high school dropout rate in half by 2018, which would mean 600,000 additional young people would graduate. So it's working on school readiness, reading at grade level in 3rd and 4th grade. It's successful transition in middle school, and then graduating, getting onto college or the next stage of life.
How does this report correlate to these goals?
Well, as you're going to hear from Cornell and Rich in just a minute, this is what I don't think we've done well as United Way or the helping communities is get people involved in social issues. You know, if you think of when real social change happens, it's not when institutional leaders make change, it's when people demand change. So whether it's civil rights, girls in sports, drunk driving, you know, smoking in public places, it was normative behavior that changed first, and then we changed to respond to it. And this report is a call, and Americans are saying, we want to get involved, we just don't know how to do it. So it's a way to start talking about how we build avenues for people to get back engaged in public education.
Sort of pushing people to the tipping point.
Inviting people. They want to be invited.
Great, thank you. Rich Harwood is the founder and leads the Harwood Institute, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that, as he says, seeks nothing less than to spark fundamental change and authentic hope in American public life. The Harwood Institute developed the framework to carry out the community conversations that are included in the report. So let's talk a little bit about the main themes of the report. You talked to a large cross-section. You talked to business people, you talked to concerned citizens, you talked to caregivers, you talked to everybody. What were they telling you?
Well, first, I think what they're telling us is, as we know, there's a lot at stake, but I think what they're also telling us is that they want to believe again in our collective ability to create change together. And as you mentioned, we went to 17 communities across the country with United Ways. They had in-depth conversations, 90 minutes, with average folks talking about their aspirations and their hopes around these issues. And I just want to put a plug in here for United Way because it's the largest national charity in this country. And Brian, through his leadership, decided that we need to send a signal, a stronger signal about turning outward, engaging people, and mobilizing people around the country on these issues. So we're glad and proud to be partners with him on this. So the themes, 5 quick headlines I want to give you. One is that people see that the fate of education and the fate of our communities are inextricably linked. This is as much an issue of building community as it is about fixing schools. We need to do both, is what people are telling us. Second, people feel shut out by the public schools. They feel as the United Way has turned outward, too many of our public schools have turned inward, away from communities. And what people are saying is we need to find ways to reconnect communities and schools if we're going to mobilize people and generate the change that they want. Third, I think what people are saying is we need to focus on the whole child. You know, We talk a lot about standards in this country. I think the folks we talked with across the country in so many states would say, yes, we need standards. Let's be accountable for what we're doing. But let's not forget that we're developing a whole child. We need to instill values in those children of honesty and decency and responsibility. And that must be our focus as well as standards. Fourth, I think what people would say is that we're at a critical turning point, an inflection point, a tipping point, as you were just mentioned. I think we need to understand just how angry people are about the state of affairs in this country. Not only their anger, God bless you, not only their anger, but there's a sadness beneath that anger. They're lamentful about the state of affairs, about how we've allowed things to get where they are.
They use those words, I'm sad?
Sad, angry, other words that I wouldn't use today. Or maybe I should, who knows?
Probably not.
I'm from New York, so you never know what's going to come out. But they do use those words, and they want to be optimistic, but it's hard right now to be optimistic. And then lastly, I think the key finding, as Brian was saying, I think people are seeing now that there is no silver bullet. There is no hero. There are no set of experts alone who are going to resolve this, that we as individuals and we as communities need to step forward together. What people said in the report, as clearly and as loudly as I've ever heard in doing this work for 25 years, is that it's up to us as individual Americans to band together and demonstrate that we have the ability to create change in our communities and take ownership both of our schools and our communities. So I'll just end with this one last point. If there ever were an issue in American society today in which we can mobilize Americans, around which Americans want to mobilize, it's education. It's education. Notwithstanding all the acrimony and divisiveness in our public discourse, people want to step forward, they want to pry open a space, and they want to come back into public life to do the hard work of building communities and taking ownership of our kids, not just some kids, all kids.
So, the 5 messages that relate to community, connection, values, urgency, and a willingness to act is sort of the big takeaway.
Right.
And I should remind everybody that the report is available online at liveunited.org. Again, you have your Blackberries out. You can check it out right now quietly if you'd like to. United Way also commissioned a poll to give a little context to these conversations, and Cornell Belcher is the president of Brilliant Corners Research and Strategies. It's the firm that conducted the survey. I know Cornell is a political, we spent a lot of time together on TV, haven't we? Together at CNN, obviously, but he is well considered to be one of the premier strategists in national politics, and also has well earned a reputation as an outside-the-box thinker. So let's talk a little bit about the poll. Give me the nuts and bolts of the poll. How was it done, and how did these messages hold up in the poll?
Well, what I think was important about our poll, and a lot of it sort of fits in right with the conversation we've been having, is that we often have a conversation about education and children up here at the top level and the policy level. But where it's most important and sort of most impactful are those communities, especially those communities where the dropout rate is disproportionately high. So what we wanted to do was hear more of those voices. So we did a robust sample size of Americans in these what we call underperforming areas of the country. We also did a national poll to sort of match up, see how they jive together. And frankly, there's a narrative out there. I mean, I'm not breaking news when I say Americans are anxious about the future. And we can actually sort of start some of the graphics now about Americans are anxious about the future. I think the story that's been missing is that we oversimplify it. It's the economy stupid. Well, truth of the matter is it's not the economy stupid, it's the future stupid. And the economy is a part of that. Americans are very anxious about the future. I don't want to use the term win the future because it's been in the political realm. However, we shouldn't politicize it because it is about winning the future, and Americans are anxious about the future. And at the center of that anxiousness are the children. And they're really concerned about what's going on with the children. As you can see, in the numbers we had, a third of parents concerned about their kids dropping out of school. Now, as a parent, the ideal that I'm waking up every day concerned that my child's going to drop out of school, and 20% of in underperforming areas very concerned that their kids are going to drop out of school is staggering. So there's a sense of urgency to this as well. And it's not just, it doesn't start or stop at the school door. I mean, I think too much of the conversation is it's all about the schools. Well, when you dig into the data, Americans don't think that the responsibility for the kids and what's happening with the kids starts or stops at the school door. They also think there's the moral decline is a part of this is a strong part of this conversation. Our ability to build strong communities is a major concern of Americans right now. And when you look at sort of their issue concerns right now, you know, we focus a lot on jobs and education, but I tell you, competing with jobs and education are concerns about rising gangs. Our concerns about, especially in the African American and Latino community, is concerned about a lack of role models for the kids. Concerned about these kids are just being disrespectful, and the kids not being prepared for the future. So there's a broad issue pocket of angst out there among Americans around children and the future. And what you're hearing is this sort of, and I work in politics, so I've grown cynical.
You what? Stunned.
But the truth of the matter is, and this sort of is what the conversation we were having is Americans are very much open to the ideal of taking greater responsibility for what's going on.
It connects to volunteerism, literally? People see that connection?
It connects to volunteerism. Americans are actually, especially in these underperforming areas, Americans are, I mean, look, they are not, they see what's going on. It's not that they don't want to get more involved in the community. Is they're not selfish. They do want to get more involved in the community. They do want to take greater responsibility. They just don't always know what the best vehicle is. And I think if we empower them, and again, it's about empowering at the grassroots. If we empower them at the grassroots and give them the vehicles and the tools to get involved and make their communities better, they will do it, you know, and again, it has to start down here, you know, not up here. I mean, some of the conversation we have is that, the civil rights movement didn't start up here. It started down here. I mean, what's the Rosa Parks moment when the people most impacted by what's going on get up and get involved? I think we had to look for our Rosa Parks moment down here in the grassroots, not always coming out of Washington or the State House.
I think that's an important point, because what we heard was both formal volunteering, I'm willing to volunteer, I'm willing to get involved, but also just a desire to reconnect with people. You know, Rosa Parks didn't go to a volunteer center and then get connected. She just acted. And so what we're hearing is we need both. That just reconnect with neighbors and communities. Get to know kids on your block. And so what this has to be about, in my view, is both volunteering, that formal effort, but also how do you start building social capital again back in, as Cornell says, the most affected neighborhoods. That has to go hand in hand. The other thing that we heard was there's great support for teachers. But the sense is teachers can't do it alone. We've got to get back involved.
Let's remind everybody how you can take a look at this report, since we're referencing it so heavily, and I want to make sure people who haven't had a chance to read it get a chance to read it. You want to go to liveunited.org. You can get the report there. I'd like to turn to the audience now, and I've got a couple of microphones, so let's have people stand up. Don't make me call on you. And wow, that worked. Sometimes that doesn't work, but in this case that worked. Introduce yourself and then ask us, give me a sense of is what you're hearing from this panel matching what you're seeing?
Good morning. I'm Christine Bonero. I'm president and CEO of the Mile High United Way in Denver, Colorado. We're very proud to be the first United Way in the country as well. And Rich, we are very much hearing, we held 15 focus groups in Colorado with business leaders and with donors and with everyday people. And it is very much resonating that the urgency is there. The facts are getting out about what's happening to our children in Colorado. And we're very fortunate in Colorado to have a governor and a lieutenant governor, Joe Garcia, who is leading from the policy side of things, how important it is in education. But it's our donors and it's our everyday people who are saying, I want to do something, but help me know what to do. If I read just the big statistics of what they are, I don't feel like I can do anything, but I think you're telling me there is something that I can do, and I think the opportunity for the United Way is for us to provide that venue of there is something very simple that will make a big difference that will begin to address these issues.
Let's take another question from our audience before anybody on our panel answers that. Do I have another question if you want to stand? Come on, oh, there we go. Look. Hold on one second. I'm going to get to you a little bit later. How are you?
Hi. My name is Rodney Slater. I'm a proud member of the United Way Worldwide Board. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the POWs. Together with them last week, in this kind of forum this week, there is a growing momentum here.
Is it outrage?
Well, I don't know that it's outrage. I think it's anger. I think it's sadness. I think it's a desire to be engaged. So I wouldn't say that it's outrage. As a matter of fact, we want to address the underlying concerns before it becomes outrage. We've seen that manifest itself in, frankly, other countries. We need to address this issue here, and I think this kind of forum starts to do that. Just a thought from my perspective. I think that we can become engaged if we start to maybe focus on a given area of this challenge that is personal to us. I'm actually from the Delta region of the United States, along the banks of the Mississippi. And over the years, I have had the good fortune of being involved in a number of activities, but now I actually want to focus on this region. And I think that there is a place for this region to be involved in this conversation. And the good thing about this conversation is that it gives individuals like me or those who might have an interest in a core city or in rural America or in Appalachia or wherever an opportunity to be engaged. And so I want to commend the effort. I want to suggest to all of us that maybe we want to think about it from a very personal perspective. And that's the way to find the 1, 2, 3 steps that we can take along this long journey that will probably involve thousands of steps, but dealing with it from a very personal perspective.
Secretary Slater, thank you very much. Appreciate that question. We got one more question, and we'll then get to our panel here to respond to all of those questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Marguerite Kondracki, President of America's Promise. And I am really struck that this is obviously a moral imperative, and that's why everybody is here, but it's also an economic imperative. When half the youth of color are dropping out of high school and a third of all young people, you know, this is soon touching every one of us in terms of the quality of life and the strength and vitality of our nation. And only 25% of the American public actually has a connection with public schools. And we've got to reach the other 75%. We've got to make them appreciate they have a stake in this issue beyond the moral imperative.
Thank you for that. It's interesting. She says 25%, but literally, if you ask anyone about education, I have found this as a journalist, everyone has an opinion on education. There is no one who says, actually, I haven't really thought about that.
Right.
They may love how they were educated, they may loathe how they were educated, but they will talk your ear off about it. So what does the United Way make of these findings?
I actually find it very encouraging because, you know, at the America's Promise Grad Nation event last week, the mayor of Oklahoma City was there, and he told the story of a regional tax increase, and I'm not advocating tax increase, but a penny increase on sales tax, and it was a region-wide issue, and they said to the voters that in the suburbs that the majority of this money is going into the city school district that is most challenged, and they passed it. What I'm encouraged by is, to Marguerite's point, I think a majority of that other 75% are starting to get this, are starting to feel this as an imperative and an issue of social justice or economic competitiveness or whatever. And we've got this opportunity right now that the window won't stay open forever to come through and invite people back in. And we're going to have to be ready to accept the messiness of people involved in formal and informal ways.
Do you want to add to that?
And we actually did test in the polling sort of the back and forth between both sort of moral imperative arguments with, you know, competition, economic arguments, and frankly, Americans get both. And I don't think there's an either-or proposition. I think it's a melding of not only must we do this to compete and grow our economy, but it's also morally the right thing to do to sort of make sure that all of our children have a great education. I don't think they're at odds.
I just want to say quickly to the Secretary Slater's comment, I think we need to remember that we need to meet people where they are, in their communities. Right. And I think the other thing we need to remember about that is that each of us comes to life with an urge to be part of something larger than ourselves, to make a difference in the world, to join with others. You know, it's not human nature to isolate ourselves and to fragment ourselves from one another. And I think one of the things that we're hearing both in the poll and in the conversations that United Ways did is a thirst or a hunger from people to come back into public life and join with others. But that, I think, requires on our part a willingness to meet people where they are, to create meaningful pathways for them back into public life, for them to have meaningful things to do in the lives of children, as Brian was saying before. This can't be make work. This can't be episodic volunteering. This can't be just press releases and press conferences. It has to be real and meaningful in people's lives.
Rich, I thank you, and Cornell also. Ryan, I'm going to ask you, obviously, to stick with us this morning as we continue to open up our conversation, not only to the folks who are here in the audience and online, but many people who are up on the stage with me as well. In television news, we have a thing called Man on the Street. We go grab somebody on the street and ask them their opinion. Because we're focused on education, we have Teacher on the Street today. United Way went on the road over the past year and attended national meetings at the country's two largest teachers' unions, the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association. And here's a small sampling of what was heard. Take a look.
What do you think needs to happen for the public system to work for kids?
What we need to do is get parental involvement with students and teachers. There should be a triangle, parents, teachers, and students working together to build a better community.
What kind of a community you want to live in?
I want to live in a kind of community where children can feel valued, where they can have a safe home environment and lots of educational opportunities and just a place to feel good about themselves.
What do you think needs to change?
Well, I think part of the thing is the fact that there has to be community programs and resources in place. And I do know that the United Way is working on that because I've seen it active in our community back home. But a lot of the times the parents don't even understand that the resources are there. So it's sometimes just getting the information out to the community.
The more we will reach out and teach our children, the better prepared they will be as adults. Because we do have to remember that they are our future. And if we do not cater to them as far as education-wise, then we have lost an whole generation.
I want to hear from more voices who are up on the stage with me. Jeff Peniston, if you would stand, I'd be grateful. Jeff is an earth science teacher at Liverpool High School in upstate New York, and he was also the New York State Teacher of the Year in 2011. A round of applause for that. Congratulations. So when you hear these educators raise their concerns and you listen to their hopes, does this match what your experience is as well?
I think it matches a lot of what I experience, and to be honest, I'm thrilled by what I'm hearing everyone in the room talk about. I mean, I've been a 25-year veteran teacher of science in the high school, public school classrooms, and what people often don't know about me is that I've spent even more of my life as a volunteer working for United Way agencies through Campfire USA as a children's summer camp program director. And I bring that up because those two parts of my life often lean on each other. And they remind me that what everyone here is saying is true, that the reality is that a public school teacher, I get 75 minutes every other day to change a kid's life, to help them to grow. But I can't do it all alone. And as the person who spends time with kids of all ages in a whole child, we heard that expression today, environment through a nonprofit agency and summer camp, that's an educational institution as well. And we have lots to learn from those agencies. And then my experience in the classroom is that when you look to your community for volunteerism, they're all over. I mean, part of the reason that I'm standing here today is because I've loved to take my kids outside the building and do other things with them. And I constantly find community members and parents who want to step up and they want to be part of the process. And when I think of my community as a place to find mentors or tutors or support for kids, it's all around. And interestingly enough, I think in my particular building, the largest group of volunteers I find in my community are the teachers themselves. They're willing to step up outside the school day and to be available to kids, and it works. If we can get kids to take advantage of what their community has to offer, this big, complicated problem really has a bright possible future.
Great. So. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Jeff. Sarah, will you stand for me while I tell everybody about you? We have with us today Sarah Reed. She's a high school student. She is one of the members of the DC Public Schools Chancellor's Student Cabinet. The cabinet is made up of at least one student from each DC public high school. Students meet monthly with the chancellor and other DCPS leadership. They serve as a think tank for district leadership, make sure that the student voice is present in all of the thinking. Sarah is also a student at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Is that right? Okay, so let's begin with the perspective of the students, because so far we've heard a lot of adults talking. When you are talking to others, which is a good thing, a fan of adults, but when you are talking to not only your fellow students, but your fellow cabinet members, how do those conversations go about improving schools?
Well, I think that students really just want to be challenged. You know, I think that educators, there are a lot of educators out there who have been pushing the envelope and, really doing what it takes to get students involved. But, in high school, the amount of hours of busy work that you put in for just those few aha moments where you really feel like you're learning something, it's just, there's far too few of those. And, I think that, as a student, I can do busy work. I could drop out and do busy work and get paid for it, and get myself a new iPod. Students aren't thinking about the long-term benefits of staying in school, and I think that increasing, like I said, those aha moments where you really feel like you're learning something new every day, that would be great.
I think that's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people. The first thing you said is challenge me. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Ms. McGee, if I may ask you to stand. Gloria McGee lives here in Washington, D.C. She is raising her grandson, Anthony. Some of her experiences, you may recognize her, were captured in the film Waiting for Superman. Her grandson, Anthony, is working hard, doing well at the Seed School here in Washington, D.C. A lot of that story was about you navigating a school system. What have you learned?
Good morning. Well, a few years ago, at the ending of elementary school, we was faced with the fact that Anthony would have to go to a school where half of the kids would drop, or either to a school where almost every kid would go on to college. So, I was like, which one would you want? I know that there is a lot of good teachers and principals out there, not taking anything away from any of them, but I'm Anthony's #1 champion. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that my grandson is successful. I know that in the best of all the worlds, every kid has a parent or a grandparent that's willing to push whenever they have to. So what you do, you go out there and you talk to the teachers and you find out if your child is missing homework or if they need extra help. You go to bat for your kid. And I find that every kid needs an adult that's going to say to them, I'm not going to let you fall into the crack. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that everything's right with them. So, and if you don't, then other people have to step in, and then, the kid is just left out there. But my thing is, do what you can for your kids. Help them out whatever you can. Fight the battle for them.
Sounds like you're all describing, thank you, Ms. McGee, you may have a seat. You're all describing sort of the legs of the stool, the teachers, the students, the parent/caregiver leg. If I may have Father Joe Palacios stand for me. Father Joe Palacios from Georgetown University, professor, Catholic priest, community organizer. A lot of the undertone of this conversation has been about values,
yes,
about sort of a community coming together, yes, to try to instill in kids certain values. What's the role of the faith community in that?
Every Sunday, and for most Christian religions, and maybe Saturday or Friday afternoon for Muslims, pastors, priests, rabbis, imams have captured audiences with their congregations. They have hundreds of people, especially like in Catholic parishes. And I think that the religious leaders really need to look at education as a key social justice issue. That the vision for their children, the future, isn't just about outcomes, but as other people have mentioned, the whole person development. In Jesuit education, and I teach at Jesuit University, We believe in the, what is called the cura personalis, which is care of the whole person. So we think of education not as just the 3 R's, but the whole sense of the development for a person's flourishing for the future. That a good person, not only who believes in his or her self-esteem, but believes that they can serve others. We call this men and women for others too. That they can be men and women for others while also serving themselves. This is basic concept of loving God, loving self, and loving your neighbor. And if we can build that into the school as kind of the value system, I'm not advocating for religious values in public schools per se, but because the families are going into those public schools, I believe that the ministers in our religious congregations really need to focus on education in their sermons, in their programs, and really connect real life with the religious not only values, but scripture and et cetera, the traditions of the church. One last thing I'd like to say, a lot of churches have their own schools. So we got religious schools, like Catholic schools and Christian schools. But our responsibility is really to the community too. You know, so for churches just to focus on their own religious education and not also focus on the responsibility of the public school system, I think is abdicating responsibility on the church part. And so I think pastors really need to see that the children, especially working class, poor kids that can't get into their own schools, they need to be working with them and providing avenues. Example, in California, when I was working in parish work and community organizing, faith-based community organizing like PICO, the IAF, other really key community organizing efforts in this country, their focus has been on public schools and connecting religious people with the public school systems and the networks necessary to rebuild the system from the ground up. So that then means that the pastors are reaching the parents are reaching the children, and it's a community effort, and we rebuild the school from the bottom up.
All right. Father Palacios, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have a short video up next. It focuses on education and jobs. Take a look.
School, number one, a good education. Get a good education, be able to make it out here in the world today.
The way the society is, raising them correctly.
Well, right now I think it's really jobs, because when I was out there at that age, I could get a job with or without an education. And today, without an education, you're only going to get minimum wage and you virtually can't live on it.
Walmart operates more than 4,300 retail facilities, employs more than 1.4 million people in the United States. So obviously Walmart's a name that everybody knows. It's also one of the country's largest donors to nonprofit organizations, to the tune of $800 million in cash and in-kind donation. That's a 2010 number, by the way. Most of that giving is based on the issues that matter most to customers and associates. And as you heard from that video clip, and I believe, as our next guest, Margaret McKenna, will be able to attest, education is really what people are talking about. Ms. McKenna is the president of the Walmart Foundation. I'm going to ask her, please, to stand. Good morning. Nice to see you. We heard some of those Walmart moms, as I know you call them. How do they reflect the company's philosophy about funding, frankly, educational opportunities?
Well, the mothers hit it on the nail. They were right, as moms usually are, right? And,
I agree completely.
Me too. And you know, you can't get a job today without a good education. You can't get a good job without a good education. And in these economic times, you probably can't even get a job. I mean, the job losses have been on people without education. So this is a real crisis, and we cannot afford to sit by, either economically or morally, and lose this generation. So we're determined to be part of the solution. And that means, you know, our customers are moms and dads, and grandparents, and their concern is their kids. I mean, that's number one. So we're giving back locally, and education is a prime focus of ours. So we're looking at getting kids ready for high school so they can read at grade level. We're expanding programs for summer learning. We're encouraging and supporting people who are doing school breakfasts so kids won't be hungry and they can actually learn. We're supporting scholarships. And We're supporting programs that for the kids who everybody's given up on, those kids who are disengaged youth. They've dropped out of school. And we're supporting programs like Youth Build and National Guard Challenge that engage those kids and give them a chance. We want to work with organizations like the United Way who are focused on these issues and want to be part of that solution.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask you to stand, if I may, while I talk to Mayor Ballard, and then we're going to come back for another question with you. Mayor Greg Ballard was elected the mayor of Indianapolis in the city which he was raised in November of 2007. Before that, he had a distinguished career in the U.S. Marine Corps as a consultant, a writer, a teacher. He says he is working to make Indianapolis the most attractive place in the country for the creation and retention of good jobs. It's nice to have you this morning. Clearly, there is and I think Ms. McKenna really hit the nail on the head about this, correlation between a strong community, a strong city, and education and economy.
Absolutely. Companies want to move where they can get a strong workforce. And you have to have an educated workforce. They also want to put the children of their employees in a good school. And so, we also know that a good school is an attraction to the neighborhood. People want to congregate around it. So it's extremely important, not just for the education piece, but also for the community piece, the quality of life and the workforce development, which is so important to a city. I mean, cities are struggling. I think most people know that right now. We hear the stories, and it cuts pretty deep to most mayors that I know of about kids, as Margaret was talking about, that really have no shot. When there are kids being born today who have very difficult circumstances. And we need to marry up the fact that we need these cities to have strong workforces. We have to have strong quality of life within the city while we are making sure that these children who really have very little shot have a real opportunity to succeed.
So you say Indianapolis is going to be the place, the most attractive place in the country. So before, give me your, no, hey, I like New York, but I like Indianapolis too. So I want to know examples of what's worked. I mean, where have you found true success?
Well, we've almost mastered the public-private partnership. We do such good work in the city, bringing people together. Our Chamber of Commerce started something called Common Goal, where they brought graduation coaches into some difficult schools. And our graduation rate across the city has gone up. It was below 70% 3 years ago. Now it's at 80%, and we hope it continues to rise. United Way with the Read Up program, making sure that the kids have that transition from reading to learn to learning to read. Got that backwards, right? So from learning to read to reading to learn, make that transition. Well, just yesterday, Kroger, a grocery company, announced $3.8 million over the next 3 years to help our kids. A lot of people know the name Lilly, the Lilly Endowment, and the Lilly Foundation. In addition to the Walmart Foundation, which helps with Youth Build. So many things are going in to make sure that those kids have every opportunity to succeed in Indianapolis. And the community is involved. And I am actually optimistic when I look at Indianapolis, and the community really does get involved to make sure that the school systems continue to rise. And I think the trend is going the right way right now, and I want to make sure it continues in Indianapolis.
Great, thank you for that. Before we get back to Ms. McKenna, let's check in with our online desk, because I've ignored you guys a little bit. Brian, Amber, what are you hearing online?
The conversation online is really taking off. There have been hundreds of tweets on our hashtag KidsWin. I'd like to share one from Sarah M2036 on Twitter. She says, "My friends read to kids each week and even helped a student complete college applications. It makes a huge difference." And Sarah, we agree.
Thank you very much. So, Ms. McKenna, and Mr. Mayor, you may sit, if you will. So what's the takeaway here for the folks of the United Way? What way do you suggest, now that we've sort of heard from the row of people suggesting ways to move this into action, what do you suggest?
Well, I think the United Way may be the only organization that may be in more communities than Walmart. And so you need someone in the community, and you need someone in the community who's respected by nonprofits and by big businesses, by Walmart and small local businesses, to spearhead something like this. And as importantly, people who want to get involved and get engaged need some kind of structure. They need some kind of training, and they need support. This is a hard job. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this is a hard job. You're working with kids who haven't had much and who deserve a lot. And persistence is really important. And you have to have an organization like the United Way giving that support so people will continue working to solve this problem.
Margaret McKenna, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thank you for that fabulous segue into our next video tape.
Good morning again. You know, as we've said, people getting involved really can create social change. And in fact, all the research shows that if we get caring adults back involved in kids' lives, it actually drives academic achievement as well as the development of a whole person. And as Secretary Slater said a few minutes ago, I think this does have to be personal for us. So let me just share a quick story about my own experience before we make what I think is an important announcement. And I grew up in a pretty chaotic family, lived on and off public assistance while growing up, know what it's like to go to the grocery store and buy food with food stamps and get the sense of how people look at you around you. We've used nonprofit services my whole life. My mom spent time in a shelter. But I was the fourth of 6 kids, and my 2 older brothers and older sister didn't go to college. And we lived in the kind of house where you try to spend time in other places. And I ended up in a friend's house whose mother took a real interest in me. And essentially, I kind of lived in that house. I did college visits with that family. We went and talked about what it took to go to college. We didn't talk about it much in my house. And then there was another friend's father who became my coach of everything. My basketball coach, my baseball coach. I wasn't involved in sports until I was 12 or 13, and he got me involved. And those 2 caring adults, one a formal volunteer, one just a friend's mom, got me on a path, the first in my family to go to college, graduate, got committed to social work and business, and my younger brother and sister then followed me to college. This matters. I mean, what we're talking about, getting caring adults in people's lives, really matters. And so it's personally really thrilling for me and institutionally proud, along with our 250 national partners, to announce our commitment today to recruit 1 million additional volunteer readers, tutors, and mentors to get involved in young people's lives. Thank you. You know, you're hearing it today. This is not one institution alone. This is, you know, Live United's not a slogan. That campaign has worked because it resonates with people. You know, we're at United Way involved in so many coalitions and other efforts that are led by folks around in this room, but we're going to have to make this commitment together. And if we do it together, as you've heard, the country's ready for it. You're going to hear other commitments as we finish the morning, but just one example as we've gone through this working relationship, the American Federation of Teachers has already committed to recruit retired teachers to come back as tutors and mentors and as reading buddies, you know, and that's a group that probably won't need a lot of training. So thank you to AFT. Now it's a real pleasure to introduce a really important partner, not just with United Way, but with so many of us in the room. The Corporation for National and Community Service is really the service organization from the public sector in the country. United Ways and many of the partners here in the room work with AmeriCorps volunteers, Senior Corps volunteers, and importantly, if you get an AmeriCorps volunteer that then coordinates other volunteers, you start to scale the involvement. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce Patrick Corvington, who, like many of us in the room, has dedicated his entire life to empowering communities. He's worked with migrant farm workers, young people, families affected by HIV/AIDS, and with the entire nonprofit sector at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. He's a great professional and a good friend. Please welcome Patrick Corvington.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. It's really great to be here. Brian's been such a good friend and just an amazing leader at United Way. And without him, I think none of us would really be here today. So thank you, Brian, for that so much. I want to thank everyone being here and folks watching online in particular. But mostly, I want to thank everyone for one important thing. And that is putting a stake in the ground and saying, I care. I want to make a difference. United Way is a powerful force in our communities throughout the country, and certainly at the corporation, we're very proud of our long relationship and look forward to the work together in terms of this bold new challenge. Now, let me say something about this challenge. This is, in fact, the right challenge. It's the right challenge at the right time. As a nation, we can answer this call, and we must answer this call. You've heard people talk about this today already. Our economy, our quality of life, our national security depend on providing the best possible education for every child in this country. To win the future, we must ensure that every child has the support they need to graduate from high school, to go on to higher education, and be ready for jobs in the 21st century. Only by doing that will we win the future. Now, the good news is that we are making progress on this goal. Graduation rates have gone up, but too many students are still struggling. 1 in 4 young people doesn't graduate from high school on time, including close to 40% of minority students. This is unacceptable. We all know at our core that this is unacceptable. There's nothing more critical than making sure that every young person gets the education they need to enjoy lives of meaning, to fulfill their potential, and to compete in the global economy. Now, you know, people have talked today on the panel, and you've seen on the videos, that we are at this interesting inflection point in the history of education reform. Brian has talked about the window is open now, and it's our choice to step through. President Obama has put a laser focus on providing a world-class education for every child in this country. Secretary Arne Duncan, Melody Barnes, both have a comprehensive strategy covering every aspect of education, and they're getting results. Much of the strategy, as you know, rightfully focuses on teachers and schools. But it also recognizes what we've heard from the panel, what we've heard from the mayor, that schools can't do it alone. Like the grandmother who changed her grandson's life, we recognize that parents and citizen volunteers are an essential part of that equation. We know this. I mean, I've seen this across this country. AmeriCorps members, senior corps members, working with kids who are troubled, offering them a beacon of hope. You know, I say this often, that one of the things that volunteers do is they offer to kids the ability and the potential to see a future that they haven't seen for themselves, to offer them a new horizon, to offer them a new vision of their own future, to see themselves walking across that stage at graduation, to imagine themselves sitting in that freshman class with peers they never thought they would sit next to. That is what volunteers do. That is what people in communities, turning to themselves, turning into communities do. I had the chance last week to see this firsthand at the Blackstone Elementary School in Boston, South End, where AmeriCorps members, experienced Corps and City Year and foster grandparents told me about how their efforts working with kids in schools were raising reading levels for students in a turnaround school, a very tough and challenged school. Tough and challenged, not because of the students. The students, you know, I met these young students, and it's so inspiring when you see young people who want nothing more than a future that they deserve, paired with volunteers who are committed to giving them that future, to offering them the path to that future. And these volunteers talked about how transformative this experience was for them. You know, people in their early 20s to people in their early 70s and in between, talking about how this work was changing their own lives, but the lives of the students with whom they were working. And just yesterday I had this amazing experience. you'll be happy to know, Margaret, that I met with a group of 100 young leaders from Youth Build who had left high school without a diploma. And today, through AmeriCorps, they're getting their diplomas, earning the Siegel Education Award for college, and making a difference in their communities. And these young people who a few years ago no one cared about, who a few years ago no one believed in their future, stood proudly together. They'd been elected from local youth builds to represent youth build students from across the country. And they stood proudly and loudly and reimagined their future and talked about one of the things they wanted to accomplish was to be in service of others. And like Brian did for his family, to lead those behind them to live lives differently than they had lived theirs. We know that these people-powered solutions work. The benefits are proven and measurable, but they're not yet working to scale. This is why, in our strategic plan at the Corporation for National and Community Service, we have made education a central priority. More than half our funding goes to education. We make it possible for great nonprofits across the country to support tutors and mentors and school volunteers that reach 3 million disadvantaged youth each year. So when I think about this challenge, 1 million more tutors and mentors, it's an ambitious goal. It'll take hard work, a sustained effort, and it has to be an all-hands-on-deck effort. And I suggest that there are 4 places to start. People of faith. People of faith volunteer more than any other group, and millions are already serving education. We should recruit more in our churches, our synagogues, our temples, and our mosques. The corporate sector. The corporate sector understands the necessity of having an educated workforce and a rich source of tutors and mentors. Our corporate mentoring challenge, which we launched this past February with the First Lady and the United Way, has already generated significant new commitments from corporate America. Baby boomers and older adults have a strong ethic of service and bring a lifetime of skill and experience that can be challenged into helping our young people succeed. And finally, high school students and college students. High school and college students must be part of the solution. Through service learning, peer mentoring, and college school partnership, we can tap the energy and idealism of young people. Last week, while I was in Boston, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Vicki Kennedy. And she told me this wonderful story about her husband, the late Senator Kennedy, who didn't just champion this notion of mentoring in education. As a senator, for 10 years, every Tuesday at 11 o'clock, no matter what, he made sure he was back from Boston in time. He went to a school on Capitol Hill and read to a young person. The first one of those students that he read to is now in college, studying to be a teacher. After the senator passed, Vicki picked up that mantle and is now involved in the same program and reads the students herself. We all need to lead by that example in this way. As the United Way report shows, the American people want to help. We see this in our research. Last year, 64 million Americans volunteered in their communities, the largest increase in volunteerism since 2003. Americans want to help. People want to help. They want to make a difference. They want to be part of the solution. But it's our jobs. It is our jobs as leaders in the solutions business to make it easy for them to answer the call, to provide the training, the management, the support for this massive new army of compassion. We are better. We are stronger. We are tougher. We are more united when we're in service of others, when we are in service of our country, when we are in service of our communities, when we are in service of our children. So thank you for putting forth this challenge. Let's get to work. Thank you.
I want to introduce now some very special participants in our program this morning. First, we have the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, the DPC as it's called, coordinates the domestic policy making process in the White House for the president. Previously, she worked at the Center for American Progress. She was also a longtime aide to Senator Ted Kennedy, who of course was a powerful advocate for kids and education. Director Melody Barnes will be joining us. Ms. Barnes, would you come up and join us, please? And our second special guest is U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan. Before joining the cabinet in early 2009, he was a chief executive officer for the Chicago Public Schools for 7 years. Growing up, he saw firsthand the powerful impact of tutors and mentors and other caring adults on young people. He spent many afternoons at a tutoring program that was begun by his mother back in 1961 on Chicago's South Side. He's a strong supporter of the role that nonprofits and other community groups can play in providing what he has called the continuum of care from birth through college. So please join me in welcoming the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, Melody Barnes, and the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. How do you do? I'm going to ask you to pose for a very well. Before you sit, let's take the gentleman. Before you sit, Brian, can I ask you to come back also? Let's take a quick photo since I have you all, as they say. Very quiet paparazzi. Thank you. Please have a seat. And I'll grab my pen. You just heard, and Brian got a large round of applause when he talked about the 1 million volunteers being mobilized to serve as mentors in schools. So we'll start with you, Secretary, if we can. What does that literally, tangibly mean? 1 million volunteers mobilized. How does that change the game?
This is a big, big deal. This is why we're all here. I think we know as early as kindergarten, those students who are going to struggle. And I say you don't have to wait till they're sophomores or juniors. You look at kindergarten attendance, and you look at those students who have attendance of less than 90%. And 90% on a test sounds good. 90% attendance means you're missing 18 days of school a year, you're missing a month. And if we can, as a nation, our kindergarten teachers will tell you what are those 2 or 3 or 4 students in their classroom who need the most help. And if we can systemically, nonprofits, social service agencies step up to the plate and partner with schools and partner with the extraordinarily hard work that the teachers are doing, our young people from the toughest of backgrounds can do extraordinarily well. And as you said in your introduction, I've been lucky enough to see that all my life. And having that mentor, that role model to help you through thick and thin, to help you in the good times and the bad times, is life transforming. So this is a huge effort, and I can't tell you how much it's going to mean to me and mean to the country if we do this well.
This morning, Melody, we have heard many people talk about education and a moral imperative. The president likes to put it as education and an economic imperative, sort of how it impacts economic policy. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it means our education reform agenda absolutely cannot wait. I mean, there was a time when you could get a high school degree and go out and raise a family and have a good middle-class life. And to be honest, those days don't exist anymore. And that means that we've got to graduate our kids college and career ready from high school. It also means that we have to get the proportion of college graduates up. We're now 9th in the world. That's not acceptable because we know the 30 fastest growing jobs are going to require a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. So we have to make sure our students are ready for that. And that also means that we can't tolerate having a 25% dropout rate. We've got 7,000 kids dropping out of school every single day. We're the greatest country in the world. That's unacceptable as well. So it means that we've got to get education reform right. We have to make sure that we're putting the best teachers in front of our children. That means we have to turn around our lowest performing schools, that we're meeting that goal of college and career ready, and that we're sending more kids into 2- and 4-year institutions so that they're ready for the jobs of the future and that our country is able to compete, that we're no longer losing productivity, that we're no longer losing billions of dollars in remedial education, and in fact, we can once again be the global player that we have been over the last few generations.
Before you both entered the room, I offered up online that whoever comes up with the best question, we'd vote on it, and they'd get to ask you the question. So good luck. Brian, I take no responsibility. Brian has that for us. Or
we get a vote?
Right. No, you do not get to vote on the voting. Amber, will you have that for me?
Yes, I do. We had a lot of great questions, so thank you for everyone who participated. This is a combination of a couple of questions, and they all centered around how do I get involved? What are some concrete examples of ways that I can get involved as a parent, to help other parents, to help teachers, and to help my school really make a difference in these kids' lives?
You know, it's been part of, I think, a theme of what we've heard today, where people seem to want to volunteer but don't exactly know what to do. And in the context of budget cuts in absolutely positively every single school, it seems sometimes as a parent or even an outsider that your hands are tied. I'm going to ask you both that question. So what do people do?
There's a number of ways to get involved. So almost every school has a PTA. That's a place to start. Almost every community has a great nonprofit or social service agency in the community who can help. And I think this idea of parents stepping up, again, I can't emphasize how important that is. Parents are always going to be their children's first teachers. They're always going to be their most important teachers. We have many, many parents that are actively engaged and supportive. We have other parents who struggle to do that, and we need to provide support. So my wife and I have 2 young children in school, and we try and do everything we can to support them and support their teachers. But if they have classmates who are struggling, I think we have a responsibility to be part of that solution as well. And the more parents are stepping up, either through a PTA, through a nonprofit, just doing it themselves, or starting an organization. You know, this is not one where you need to ask permission. You just need to, show some initiative, show some leadership, step up. And again, if we can identify those children early on who don't have the supports they need, this can be a life-transforming opportunity for them.
Absolutely. I mean, to pick up on what Arnie was saying in terms of parents being their children's first teachers, and I know I'm so grateful for everything my parents did. The President talks about it all the time. You know, turn off the TV, read to your children, turn off the video games, or use those games that are active teachers themselves, and you can do that at home. But one of the other things that we're doing through our education reform efforts is encouraging schools to reach out and to engage parents. We know a lot of parents who say, I want to be involved, but sometimes I feel like I'm being pushed away. So we're adding additional resources and encouraging schools to do that. And we're also saying to parents, as Arnie was just saying, go in, be involved, understand what's going on at your child's school, understand what's going on with your children from day to day, and obviously being a mentor for children who don't have that kind of support can be a lifesaver and a game changer for a child.
I think you said the United States is number 6, number 9 in number 9 in sending kids off to college. So let's talk bluntly. What's at risk? What if we don't do it? What do we lose? What happens?
Well, I mean, we're seeing some of the ramifications from that today. If they're not prepared to go to college and to graduate, when we talk to employers, they're saying, look, we need active, creative, analytic thinkers. We need people who have great communication skills and who are collaborators. Those skills that you're learning K through 12 and taking into college and getting degrees in subject matter areas that are going to help you take those jobs of the future, the jobs that are being created worldwide. We know that we are dealing with issues of globalization. We have to have kids in a workforce that's trained for the jobs of tomorrow so that they can have economic security, but also so that we can be more globally competitive as a nation. That is what's at risk right now.
If they do not individually, what happens to us as a nation?
So I see this through 3 different viewpoints. So we've talked repeatedly about this being the civil rights issue of our generation, that to me the dividing line in our country today is less around race and class than it is around educational opportunity. As Melly said, this is an absolute economic imperative. What folks don't quite understand, that at a time of very high unemployment, we have a couple million unfilled jobs in our country today that are high-skilled, knowledge-based, great-paying jobs that we're just simply not producing the workers who have those skills. And Melody and the president and I met with a number of CEOs a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing how many CEOs says, we are actively trying to hire now in this tough time, and we can't find the people to fill this. So it's an absolute economic imperative. And then the final one that stuns folks is, I did a press conference last week in San Diego with a number of generals and admirals, folks from the military. Less than 1 in 4 of our young people today can qualify for the military. Less than 1 in 4. They're either academically unprepared, they're physically unfit, or have a criminal record. So civil rights issue, economic imperative, issue of national security, whatever your lens, and all 3 are true, Melody's point is we have to get better faster than we ever have. There is a huge sense of urgency, and the costs are tremendous if we don't.
Really, literally lost GDP. Significant portions of GDP lost because of lack of education attainment.
How do you turn outrage into a more productive sense of urgency? I mean, you know, like you got to move the ball to people getting things done. I see a lot of people complain. People, you know, throw stuff at their TVs. But in terms of saying, okay, I will be the person who does X, how do you make that transition, which to me at least seems to be the $64,000 question, the important transition?
Well, we're seeing it already, and I think Arnie and I are seeing it as we travel the country individually and together and with the president. This is happening in communities around the country, which is the really exciting thing right now. You know, we were talking about the dropout rate, 25% dropout rate. We have to turn those schools around. We're seeing communities come together. We are seeing it as we are putting more volunteers. The Community for National Service, the Corporation for National Community Service is actively involved in that, along with the Department of Education. So people are turning that anger and frustration into how do we turn our schools around and create a better community and better environment to support our teachers, to use collective bargaining and other tools as progressive tools to try and create better classrooms. We're also seeing it in the business community. A number of the initiatives that we've started over the course of the last year, Change of the Equation being a great example, where CEOs have stepped up and said, we've got to have better science, technology, engineering, and math education. We're going to work with the government to support teachers, to support school systems, to support classrooms, to support individual students so they're getting a better education. So we see local communities, we see the business community all stepping up to say we've got to turn this around, and they're doing it because they know we need to. So you can turn that energy into something quite productive.
I'm going to give you the final question. We talked a little bit in your introduction about your mom and your experiences with really her mentoring. How critical is mentoring? And does it have to be, you know, 3 days a week, 5 hours a day?
Well, it is absolutely important, and it's not so much the time, it's the quality. And obviously, she's been doing this for 50 years. They didn't have the technology, they didn't have internet. You can do this stuff online as well. But at the end of the day, all of us need those adults in our lives who are going to help us uncover those gifts, uncover those talents that we may not even know that exist within us. And for students who don't have all the support we'd like them to have at home, this will change their lives forever. And I always tell the example that I had two great parents, wonderful family, both very well educated. From the time I was 10 years old, I was lucky enough to have a mentor, a role model, John Rogers, a mutual friend of ours, who has really helped to shape me. And I think how lucky I've been to have him in my life every step of the way for about 35 years now. And I had all the advantages. I had two parents who were educated. They were reading to us every single night. So I think about the child coming from a family who doesn't have those benefits, how much more important it is for them.
Great. Well, I thank you both, Director Rogers and Secretary Arnie Duncan. A big round of applause for them. Thank you. I certainly appreciate it. Pleasure to have you. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you. While they take their seats on stage, we will move to our next panel. Thank you. Appreciate that. How do you do? Good morning. May I ask you to stand? Everybody, this is Barry Salzberg. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Deloitte LLP, which has nearly 45,000 employees in the United States, regularly ranked in Fortune, Business Week, Working Mother. The list goes kind of on and on and on as one of the best places to work. Deloitte is also a United Way Global Corporate Leader, which is an elite group of United Way's most generous and most involved companies. So thank you for talking with us. So what kind of advice do you give other people who are leading companies about how to encourage their employees to be involved in genuine and tangible ways?
Well, first off, you have to lead from the top. So an organization like ours, the messaging has to start at the top and cascade into the organization.
Meaning you?
Meaning me and all of the other leaders within our firm. And our people take that march. That's first off. There's got to be consistent messaging. Second, we have to build in the importance of community and volunteerism into the fabric of the organization. So we're a service business. Our people deliver service to clients. Well, we also say deliver service to the not-for-profit world and focus your time on pro bono activities, volunteer your time as part of your commitment and expectations as an employee. So we have to build it into the organization, set the tone at the top, make sure all of our employees get evaluated by their commitment to not just client service, which is what we're in business for, but also giving back to the community. We have made education a top platform. So in working through their volunteerism, we're encouraging all of our employees to give back through the education platform.
45,000 employees. My guess is you have just over 44,000 different issues that people would love to focus on. Why education? And is that a hard pitch for your employees to pick sort of one thing to be great at?
With 45,000 employees, it's actually 45,000 different issues. But our objective really is to look at what's important to our people, what's important to our country, what's important to our business. And frankly, we need high talent, highly skilled individuals to service our clients going forward. And if tomorrow that gap between the demand for our services and the supply of high talent is widening rather than narrowing, we have a business imperative to make that change. And so it's our future, it's our country's future, and so we've decided that it needs to be the platform, our signature issue, to really drive. And our focus is really to increase the college going rate and the persistence rate in college, and we're working with organizations to have our time, our pro bono services, our people's energy and minds to really help make that change. It's a business imperative for us.
Mr. Salzberg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I certainly appreciate it. As most of the people in this room are well aware, the United Way works with many partners on education and is a founding member of the America's Promise Alliance. America's Promise Alliance is a partnership of corporations, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and advocacy groups that are passionate about improving the lives of children. And for the past 3 years, America's Promise Alliance has been focused on ending the dropout crisis, trying to raise high school graduation rates and ensuring that graduates are both prepared for success in college and also the 21st century workforce. I had an opportunity actually to attend very happily one of the Alliance's 105 dropout prevention summits. The one I went to was in Alabama in March of 2009, and I had a chance to sit down with Mrs. Alma Powell. Last year, the Alliance launched their Grad Nation campaign, and I'm going to ask now Michael Powell and Mrs. Powell, Mrs. Alma Powell, to stand up for it. Michael is the co-chair of the Grad Nation and the president and the CEO, of course, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. Nice to see you both. It's a real pleasure. Michael, let's begin with you, and let's start with Grad Nation. What exactly is Grad Nation?
Well, I think the first thing we have to recognize is that a grad nation is a healthy, happy, prosperous, vibrant nation, one that has a land of opportunity. One that it is not a grad nation has a dark and unprosperous future. And I think we have good reason to fear or not have a sufficient confidence we're in the former category. In this country, it's a moral issue, but it's just as much a socioeconomic issue. Every year, this country loses $320 billion in lost wages and buying power among our citizenry, and that is not a path to great success in the information age. Grad Nation is an effort to mobilize the nation to reverse that trend, and our goal is simple: to make the graduation rate closer to 90% by the end of the decade. And our focus is on the toughest schools and communities. We're focusing on communities where there's a 50% or less dropout rate. These schools represent maybe only 12% of the high schools nationwide, but they account for 50% of the dropout crisis. It sounds daunting, but in our judgment, it's achievable, and we're beginning to see the results. Just in the last several years, we've seen about a 3% improvement in the dropout rate. We have some communities like Philadelphia and New York who've actually had double-digit increases. And we've seen the number of dropout factories, we call them, drop to about 1,600 from a high in 2002, around 2007. So this can be done. This is the most ambitious effort in the history of America's Promise Alliance, and I think its audacity properly matches the seriousness of the problem. And at the end of the day, it may be our goal to try to mobilize, but it's everyone's objective in this room to do the moving. And we're confident with everybody's oars in the water, the country will get to a good place.
Let me turn to Mrs. Alma Powell. When we were in Alabama, not that long ago, we spoke about this mobilization and sort of engaging everybody in this effort. What are some of the big obstacles and how can you overcome them?
Well, when we're thinking about improving schools and the rate of graduation in schools, we have to understand that schools can't do the entire job. We ask a lot of our schools, and a lot of talk about reform and teachers and curriculum and core curriculums. All of that is very important. But we have to realize that every child does not come to school ready to learn. A child who has no one at home to be sure that they have on a clean dress that morning or to even get out of bed in time to get to school, that child has a handicap. A child who comes to school hungry and not feeling good cannot learn. The very best school in the country cannot assure that when those children walk out of the door of the school and out into the community, that they have a safe place to go. The most dangerous hour in America today are the hours between the time school is out and 7 o'clock when parents come home. Too many children are footloose and without direction and not safe, frankly. The very best school cannot give its students an insight into the outside world and to careers that are possible. It can't encourage them on its own and by itself to dream dreams and see the possibilities of things. And the very best school in the world cannot take the responsibility of teaching children how to give back. It takes all of us to do that. When we talk about the problems that exist in this country, too often we hear they need to do this, they need to do that, they need to do the other. We have to understand there's no they.
We're the they?
It's us. It's us. It's us living the slogan of this meeting, living united. That is what's important.
Great. I thank you both, Michael Powell and Alma Powell. Margaret Spellings was the first mother of school-aged children to serve as a U.S. Secretary of Education. She grew up in Houston, worked for the then Governor, George W. Bush, on education initiatives, served in the White House after President Bush took office, was appointed to the Department of Education in 2004. Since then, she's opened a public policy and strategic consulting firm, serves on the boards of many organizations, including America's Promise Alliance, the Education Equality Project, and also the Special Olympics. It's nice to have you. Thanks for being with us today. So we're not going to debate No Child Left Behind legislation because we could spend we could spend several hours on that today. But I do want to talk about something that you wrote back in October, and you talked about the need for Washington leadership to listen to parents. Why is that so critical?
Well, it is so critical because without information and without a feeling of connectedness to the school, parents really feel paralyzed. No Child Left Behind really brought a lot of that great information about the quality of the school, what was wrong, what's working, the quality of the teachers, to really arm parents with some tools, to arm communities, as America's Promise and others have done through summits. You know, what do we need to do first? Is our problem a high school problem? Is it a math science problem? Is it an early reading problem? You know, where can we go? And so to be very precise about our good intentions and our good deeds, what do we need to do first? One thing I want to also add that I think has not been said today is, and we often overlook because we think about, well, we're going to give back and we're going to, you know, do something for someone else. And I think those of us who have mentored and helped kids understand how rewarding it is to you. You get so much more than you give often. I mean, it is the most powerful, rewarding thing to save a life, to help a kid, to make that connection as human beings. So I just want to make sure that people get that message that we need you, but you need this.
You've talked a lot about accountability over the years, and sometimes I think it's a disconnect between volunteerism and accountability. You don't often think of, you know, how are volunteers playing a role in holding people accountable?
Well, they're completely mutually reinforcing all of this. You know, as Mrs. Powell said, you know, it takes all of us to really get to work around that goal. And I think one of the things that is powerful about No Child Left Behind and where we are and what has taken us in great part to this critical sense of urgency is we now understand what the problem is. We're not in denial anymore about it. And so I think accountability and volunteerism really helps us to be very smart and strategic about how we use resources, how we use people. That's the reason that America's Promise had these summits, because states had different plans and different approaches and different needs and issues. So we've got to be very targeted and very intelligent about how we apply our volunteer labor force.
Former Secretary of Education, Margaret Spelling. It's nice to have you. Appreciate it. Nnamdi Asomugha. True? Got it? Thank you. Thank you. I won't test you on Soledad. That's a tough one, too. He has been called one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. But that's not why we have him here today, obviously. He has a vision for education that it could serve as a springboard for innovation and growth, and so he supports education through his own foundation, also through the United Way and other organizations also. He is a recipient of way too many awards for community service and leadership that I could possibly mention this morning. He is also now the National NFL Ambassador for the United Way's Live United campaign. May I ask you to stand so I can ask you some questions? Thank you. I read your op-ed that you wrote not that long ago, and you really used the framework of teamwork, but talking about kids and to some degree education. I don't think people often think about team when they're thinking about a kid in education. Why is that your metaphor?
It was just some way to bring sports into it. So I said team, but...
That's funny, but you're lying.
Right. But, it just goes along with what everyone has been saying today. Having a support system with you throughout your years growing up. I think we've all had some sort of support system that has helped us get to where we are. Whether it's your neighbors or teachers or people in the community that have helped you. But the concern is for the students that don't have the support system or have not realized who their support system is. So what I was able to do was start a college tour, and I've been able to work with the United Way for the last 5-6 years, locally and nationally, just to try to be a part of a team for those students that feel like they're playing, by themselves.
Tell me a little bit about this college tour. You take more than a handful of kids to walk around and get an experience. For some of them, they've never been to any college at all and are really not knowledgeable about college. Tell me about it.
Right, for some of them, they've never been on airplanes before or never left their cities. Many of the students are from Oakland, California, and many of them have never been across the bridge to San Francisco. They're in these underserved communities, but they still manage to have 3.5 GPAs, and they still manage to be doing so well. One of the students that I took a year ago was homeless, but he had a 4.0 GPA, was applying to Harvard and everything. But, when you're in those sort of communities, you tend to not realize the possibilities that you have in front of you. So they'll be doing so well in those communities, but not do anything with that education, just stay there because that's all that they know. So I take them on these tours, and it kind of broadens their perspective and their horizon and makes them think about education in a different way.
We have a videotape that focuses a little bit on the tour. So you're tall. We're going to move you out of the way and let everybody else sit. We'll come back over here, and we'll let them roll the tape.
Up, college is hard. Down, those books are heavy.
My sport is football, but my passion is education.
Right up here.
So every year, I take promising high schoolers on a college tour
Lights there, darts there.
to show them that higher education means a brighter future. My name is Nnamdi Asomugha. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Find out how you can live united for education. Give, advocate, volunteer. Go to liveunited.org.
Do you wear this?
Come back. You're funny. You have a future in comedy after, you decide you don't want to play in the NFL anymore. In all seriousness, there are many people who would love to do something similar, but they don't have the financial resources, they don't have the marquee name, they don't necessarily feel that they have the same leverage that you do. What can they do?
I think everyone has leverage in some way. Everyone has resources that they can use. I've been blessed with professional football, so that's helped me. But I think if the college tour is what someone wants to do, they can do that. in their city, you know, or in their area. There are colleges, I'm sure, nearby where they can take students. And that would probably be free because it's not very far. There are many ways. Just find whatever resource it is that you have. If you love to read, then read to elementary school students. Or if you love sports, then you can find an after-school program and be in some sort of physical education course or something to help out with those students. But I think there are plenty of ways, as you've heard today, where people can get involved.
All right, Nnamdi, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation is a longtime United Way partner with the mission of supporting children and families and communities to help vulnerable children achieve success. Greg Taylor, thank you for standing, is the foundation's vice president for strategy. He's been involved in many of the initiatives. In a nutshell, what do you think it's going to take to move the needle, to bring success to all kids?
Well, I think the operative word there is all kids. We've heard a lot today about underserved communities, or certain children are making it and others aren't. What we found at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation is it's really important to be explicit about issues of racial equity. Unfortunately, in so many communities across the country, there are racialized outcomes for kids. You know that in many underserved communities, it's African American, Latino, and others that really are disproportionately impacted by poor schools and underperforming classrooms and the like. And so for us to be intentional, and when we're trying to encourage the country to be intentional about what are those communities that are struggling with these issues most notably, and we really want to work to recruit and partner with allies from all communities to really be explicit about what it takes to move the needle in those underserved communities. The other issue for us is about early childhood education. Unfortunately, there's so many kids in the country that literally are not arriving at the school door ready to go. You've heard a lot of those statistics today. We understand if you invest early and you invest often with young people from pre-birth, that's the P, through third grade, that we really think you can dramatically improve learning outcomes for kids by giving them a healthy, whole, and supported start into the education that we want them to seek. What kind of advice would you give to other people whose jobs like yours are to run foundations? Yeah, well, I wish I was running them. I'm kidding. I think the notion is oftentimes we just get looked at for our financial resources, but we have incredible connections and networks. We have lots of lessons that we've learned through our wonderful partners across the country. And so the advice that I'd give to foundations is to use your full arsenal, if you will, of resources, financial networks, knowledge, and the like. And really it's about nurturing and developing leadership at the local level. Oftentimes foundations get way too much credit for what we do. We simply invest in partners that have been around these issues for years and years. And so for us, it's about capacity building, and it's about leadership development around these core issues. And we just think education is by far the way that you advance one generation over the other. And so that's why we focus so clearly on this topic. Greg Taylor from W.K. Kellogg, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Ann Stollard is the chair of the U.S. Board of Trustees for the United Way. She co-founded the Women's Legacy of the United Way in 1999. Now it's known as the Women's Leadership Council. Has 40,000 members nationwide, mobilizes to support education, income, and health. She is the CEO of Graphic Communications Corporation in metropolitan Atlanta, active in numerous other businesses and nonprofit organizations. It's nice to see you. Good morning. Let's talk about this 1 million number. Exactly how are you mobilizing to try to help meet that goal?
Well, the United Way's Women's Leadership Councils, of which there are more than 120, and the good news is, I want to update your figures, that it's more than 50,000 volunteers now.
I stand corrected happily.
Yes, it's very good news. Have now committed themselves to, and you need to listen up to this because this is really important, being responsible for 100,000 of the million volunteers. So I think that this is a testament to the dedication and the stickability of women in this country who've said, and a huge variety of women who've said, we can do better than this, we will do better than this, and we're committing ourselves through the Women's Leadership Councils of United Way all across the United States to participate in this. This was actually voted on just recently at their Leadership Summit, and I think that that is an incredible contribution of time, energy, and effort. You know, we're very grateful for people who donate. But one of the things that women love to do is not only donate financially to something, but to be intrinsically involved and go over time to see that what matters to them in improving community is something that they really can invest in time, talent, and treasure. So I think that this is going to be a wonderful utilization of that huge talent pool, as well as utilizing their own personal and professional networks, which you know we're kind of good at.
We're pretty good at that. You know, Brian, when he came to the podium, he talked about his childhood, and I have met him many times, and I had no idea the chaos of his childhood and sort of how he, in a lot of ways, lucked into finding a family that changed his life, and in turn, he could change his own siblings' lives. Tell me a little bit about your experience. I know you grew up in rural Virginia.
I did. Interestingly enough, we often think of the cities as where isolation is, or perhaps the lack of resources. I grew up in Wise County, Virginia, and in a very rural area, coal mining country, often referred to as Appalachia. And what we had there, we had very wonderful, and I had a rich experience with my family in terms of their devotion to the children in the family. My grandmother in particular, who went to college, which was called normal school, for 2 years to get a degree in teaching, came home to teach in Snowflake, Virginia, in a one-room schoolhouse. But a generation later, what I got from that is she read to me, she talked to me, and in that rural area introduced me to a larger vision of the world. We were right there, but I had a feeling that she opened the entire world to me. And of course, my parents assured me and my brother through their constant reading to us as young children, talking to us, involving us, that there was hardly anything we couldn't do. So when I went to the University of Kentucky and got involved actually in other organizations like the YWCA, a student version of that, and others, I really felt that I had learned to be, from the time I was a brownie, how to be a citizen, how to take responsibility, and how to be involved with others in community to make good things happen for all of us, not just for some of us. And I think that's what the message of United Way is today, and it's very important to me as a small business owner. I want a really healthy, robust, dynamic community. And today in my high-tech printing business, we have to have people who have a great education of the most cutting edge of technology. It's not a craft anymore. It's a real high-tech business. And so the health of the community does depend on us being great citizens, focusing on the greatest opportunity we have for this country being strong, which is the education of our children.
Ann Stallard, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Please have a seat. Thank you. Okay, so I want to bring in our audience now in front of me and also online. Let's begin with online, but I'm only saying that to give the people out here a moment to mobilize and come to the microphones, if you will. Who wants to take this, Brian or Amber? Brian, go ahead. What do you got online?
Sure, I'll take this. We have, again, a very active conversation. It's hard to keep up with it so fast. But
you're young, try.
Well, we have one very talented audience member who's also very involved in the online conversation as well. Rosalind Smith, who's here from Washington, D.C., Roz Lioness on Twitter, says, education is the modern civil rights issue, and it will take a combination of methods to invite change.
Interesting point. All right, Roz, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And she did so quietly. Notice, we didn't even notice that she was tweeting as we were carrying on our conversations. Well, why don't we go ahead from our audience, tell us who you are, and then ask your question or make your comment.
My name is Sonia Pruitt. I represent the National Black Police Association. Thank you for all of your comments and your ideas. I'm on my iPad taking them all down so I can take it back to the organization. But I was making my own notes, and three things that I thought about. I served as a supervisor for a group of educational resource officers who worked in the middle and high schools. And one of the things that we noticed is that not only were we important as mentors, it wasn't that we were there as law enforcement. We became mentors for many of the kids. But the thing that was problematic was that we realized we needed to mentor the parents as well. A lot of parents are fearful, they don't know how to help their children, so if we're mentoring them and we're tutoring them, then they need a skill as well, which means when the kid comes home, who's there to support them? So that's one thing I want people just to think about, if you would. Secondly, utilize us as law enforcement officers. We have a unique position in that we get to go into people's homes. We get to see them at their basic levels of operation. We get to see kids living in some very, very poor situations. And so utilize us, talk to us, call us. We're there to help. Thirdly, I would like to say as a parent, I have twin boys, they're 8 years old. And I think my biggest lesson recently was learning that I have to accept them where they are, accept who they are. They're twins, but they're on different ends of the spectrum. So that's a great learning curve for me. And so I would say, as we go out into our communities, please be cognizant that every child is different, and all of them have a great gift, and we can learn from them as well as them learning from us. So just let us accept them as who they are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love a girl who's reading her questions off her iPhone. We have only time probably for 2 more questions. So if you will indulge me, I'm going to ask short, tight, and we'll see what we can get in. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Addie Richburg, and I'm president of the National Alliance of Faith and Justice. And I stand here today also representing Susan L. Taylor, who's out of the country for the National Cares Mentoring Movement. Of course, we have a lot of questions, but we also want to say that one of the recurrent themes today have been the civil rights movement. And we have found that using that template of the civil rights movement today can be used to engage students who were active members of the civil rights movement, the faith community, the school community, et cetera. We too are joining with you to mentor and to gain mentors all across the country. And we ask you this one question: are there targeted efforts among you who have decided to reach out to the specific communities that are, as we have said, the lowest performing schools, the lowest performing communities, et cetera, among any of those today?
Great, thank you. And our regards to Susan, of course. Appreciate that. Another question right here.
Good. Good morning. I'm Barbara Spencer-Dunn. I'm a member of the Kiamsha Youth Empowerment Organization, which is a member of the Pen or Pencil Mentoring Network. And my question is, I hope to Secretary Duncan, there's a historical perspective missing. I am wondering, is there a plan to actually make sure that history is complete and correct? As an African American, I know the African American account is missing. And also, while we have the children mobilized for 5 days a week, how about a plan for character development? What I find that there's not a lack of intelligence on the children's part, it's a lack of character. And so if we build the character while we have them mobilized, I wanted to know, do you have a plan to do those too?
Let's get a microphone to the secretary. Can we answer that? You've got one on.
Yeah, great question. So a couple thoughts on that. One thing that we as a federal government can't do is dictate curriculum, and that's something that's done at the local level, but where you have parents stepping up, and we've seen, I live in the state of Virginia, you've seen Virginia start to change a bunch of their textbooks because their versions of history simply weren't accurate. And so parents stepping up, demanding accuracy, demanding comprehensive sense of history, I think is hugely important. So that's not one we can dictate or mandate from Washington, but at the local level where parents and others are paying really close attention, we're starting to see some changes that frankly should have happened a long time ago, and that activism is desperately needed. On the sort of the character education, that's something that schools more and more, right or wrong, need to be engaged in. And teaching right from wrong, teaching values, teaching ethics, whether it's done during the school day or after school with a club or a group. I think those lessons are hugely important, and where we're seeing schools become safer and safer, those kinds of lessons are part of the culture. The final thing I'll say, to the first question is we think about these 1 million volunteers and how best to deploy them. We've identified, with states' help, the bottom 5% of schools around the country, schools that are really struggling. The Powell family's done a great job of shining a spotlight on those high schools or those dropout factories. And I think if we can strategically focus on those high schools, those feeder middle schools, those elementary schools, we're investing as an administration a huge amount of money there, $4 billion, in a radically different vision of what can happen. But if we can be very targeted and very strategic, I think we can, we've seen the number of these dropout factories be reduced, which is very encouraging, but those numbers are still unacceptably high. I think if we can be very strategic, very surgical there, we could increase the rate of change, the rate of improvement, and that would be of great dividend to those children, those communities.
Okay, thank you for that. We have time for one more question, a really short, tight, focused question.
I'm Dr. Deborah Litt. I'm a professor here in the School of Education and Literacy Education, and I have a suggestion to follow up with from Ms. Pruitt. I have found that many parents want to help their children, don't really know what to do, and are very busy. They work and so forth, and their time is limited. The workplace, where you already offer workshops and trainings for employees on things like using Excel or sexual harassment, you could offer workshops and training for parents on how to talk to your child, what's important, how to help your child with homework, the importance of reading to children and providing age-level appropriate books, and so forth. You know, it's boundless, and that is a place to quickly and reach parents and reach many of them. And
Great.
thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. A couple of quick points. You can have your question answered online at united.org, liveunited.org, because we do not have time right now in the forum. If you want to continue the conversation, you can also join us for lunch, which is right down the hallway. We hope that you'll take us up on that. We're at the end of our town hall. We've certainly covered a lot of ground. A big round of applause, please, for the number of people who have participated. We hope that you will think about the call to action, you'll think about volunteering, you will think about talking to your friends and family and continuing this conversation about something that is so critical and so important to really the fabric of this country and the fabric of our future. I thank you so much for being with us this now afternoon, and we appreciate it.
Take my hand and start a brand new day, and together as one we'll start to see some change. Take my hand and start a brand new day, together